In the Level 1 accreditation course, you learnt the basic skills and fundamentals of position for the one umpire system. Now we're going to look at the operation of the two umpire system with particular emphasis on positioning and control.
The role and positioning of each field umpire in the two umpire system is largely determined by where the play is on the field. Exactly where the play is at any moment, and therefore the positioning of the umpires, is determined by reference to certain real and imaginary ground markings. The playing field is divided into halves lengthways by the major axis. This is an imaginary straight line that runs between the centre point of the goal lines at both ends, passing through the centre. The minor axis divides the playing field sideways and is an imaginary line extending from wing to wing through the centre. The ends of the centre square run parallel to the minor axis, and the sides of the square are parallel to the major axis. The tram lines are imaginary lines which extend from the sides of the centre square to the boundary lines at both ends of the ground, parallel to the major axis. The 50-metre lines extend in an arc from one boundary line to the other. Every point on that arc is 50 metres from the centre of the goal. The one umpire area is the area at each end of the ground within 50 metres of the goal. In other words, within the 50-metre lines. The umpire is the umpire who is controlling play at any given moment, the one who makes the decisions. Number 2 is the umpire who is not controlling play at that moment. A set play is the play which results from a mark or the awarding of a free kick. The terms inside the play, short side and long side refer to the umpire's position. The umpire is inside the play when the play is between him and the nearest boundary line. The umpire is on the short side when he is between the play and the nearest goal. He is on the long side when play is between him and the nearest goal. An attacking player is any player in the team which has possession of the ball. A defending player is any player in the team which does not have possession of the ball. And one last definition. Change of control occurs when control passes from one umpire to the other. At that moment, the umpire relinquishes control to number 2, who then becomes the umpire, and the one who was the umpire becomes number 2.
The responsibility of the umpires begin well before the start of the game. They must first decide who will commence the game as the umpire. This is done in the umpire's room before they enter the arena.
They enter the arena in the following order. The field umpires lead the way, walking side by side, followed by the boundary umpires, then the goal umpires. The field umpire who will start the game as the umpire carries the football, and when the group is approximately 25 metres inside the playing area, holds the ball aloft until the timekeepers signal their acknowledgement with a single blast of the siren. The group continues to the centre circle, where the field and boundary umpires may break away to commence their warm-up. The team captains report to the umpire for the toss of the coin, with the visiting captain making the call. The teams move to their respective positions. Then the umpire consults with the captains as to their readiness to start. He holds the ball aloft, awaits acknowledgement from the timekeepers, which is by way of a further single blast of the siren, blows his whistle to commence play, and bounces the ball.
Control and positioning are the most critical factors in the operation of the two umpire system. Cooperation, communication and concentration are essential if the game is to run smoothly. A fundamental principle, or golden rule if you like, is that the umpire always has control and only he can instigate a change of control. Under no circumstance can number 2 instigate a change of control. Another general rule is that except for a few special circumstances, which we'll look at later, the umpire is responsible for awarding all free kicks and marks.
As mentioned in segment 1, the ground is divided into halves sideways by the minor axis. As we said earlier, before the start of the match, the umpires will have decided who will commence the game as the umpire, and he will bounce the ball to start the first and second quarters. The other umpire will bounce to start the third and fourth quarters. For the centre bounce, the umpire makes his approach along the minor axis. Number 2 stands about 50 metres along from the goal line and 20 metres from the major axis on the opposite side of the ground to the umpire. After the bounce, and providing no infringements have occurred, the umpire backs off along the minor axis and makes position according to the play. If the ball stays in the immediate vicinity or travels towards the umpire's half, he retains control as the umpire. Number 2 should be adjusting his position on the field accordingly, prepared to become the umpire should the ball be clearly kicked into his area of the ground and control be handed over. If the ball doesn't go clearly in either direction, the umpire retains control and number 2 backs away. After each goal, the umpire will give the all clear and move to a position approximately 50 metres along from the goal line and 20 metres from the major axis, and on the side of the ground to which the first boundary umpire runs. In doing this, the umpire becomes number 2. When the all clear is given, number 2 moves to the centre square to receive the ball from the second boundary umpire. Number 2 then becomes the umpire. If, for reasons of sun, wind or ground conditions, it would be better for the umpire to change sides of the major axis for the centre bounce, he may do this after he has received the ball from the boundary umpire. Responsibilities at the centre bounce are clear-cut. The umpire is responsible for awarding free kicks for infringements observed at centre bounces. Number 2 may award penalties for 5-in-square infringements, for example, holding, shepherding, charging and so on, but not infringements in the actual ruck contest, except when the umpire is obviously unsighted, such as when he is interfered with or knocked over.
Correct positioning is essential if the game is to be controlled effectively and efficiently.
As a general rule, and especially when the ball is in contest, the umpire should try to be inside the play, about 20 to 25 metres away. Remember, inside the play means that the play is between the umpire and the nearest boundary line. If play heads towards the boundary line, the umpire must try to get on the side of play. If play is within a kick of goal, he should run to the long side. If play is beyond a kick at goal, he should run to the short side. The umpire's position at a boundary throw-in depends on where the ball went out of bounds. If the throw-in takes place within a kick of goal, the umpire should take up position on the long side of play. When the throw-in is beyond a kick at goal, he should take up position on the short side. In both cases, he should be side-on to the players who are contesting the hit-out at the point of contact. As soon as one of the players makes contact with the ball, he must move quickly towards the major axis. For field bounces, the umpire should face the boundary, goal or behind line when he is near those lines. This is to ensure he isn't caught outside the play after the bounce. When number 2 is behind play, he should be a little less than a kick away from play, either within the tram lines or just outside, according to play. He should continually adjust his position according to the movement of play. If number 2 is forward of play and play heads towards him, he should run backwards quickly and move to the side of the major axis opposite to where he anticipates the ball to be kicked. As play moves up and down the ground, control passes from one umpire to the other. These changes of control must be made smoothly and efficiently to avoid confusion among players, spectators, and of course the umpires themselves. The first rule to remember with regard to control is that only the umpire can instigate a change of control. Number 2 can never instigate a change. When the umpire decides to relinquish control, that is to pass control to number 2 so that he becomes the umpire, he stops running. Number 2 should be watching the play and ready to take control as soon as the umpire stops moving. The onus here is on the umpire to make his intentions known in an obvious and decisive manner. If the umpire has had control for a long time, he may decide to arrange a change of control during a suitable break in play, such as where a behind has been scored. In this case, he may call number 2 in to take over as the umpire. A second example is where the umpire has retained control while the ball has travelled into number 2's half of the ground and gone out of bounds. In this case, the umpire can instigate a change of control by calling in number 2 to take the throw-in. There are 4 situations where the umpire will retain control in general play. The first involves short kicks or kicks across the ground. Here, the umpire should retain control because he is usually in a better position to see the next act of play. The second concerns kicks out of defence. If such a kick is unlikely to cross the end of the square line or its extension to the boundary line, the umpire should retain control. This enables number 2 to get into good position if the ball continues quickly to the forward line at the other end of the ground. The third situation occurs where a player runs with the ball towards number 2. In this case, the umpire should retain control and run with the play. Number 2 should back off to be ready for when the player kicks the ball further down the ground. The fourth situation is that control must never change while the ball is in contest, even when it travels into number 2's one umpire area. But even though the umpire retains control, he must be on the lookout for an opportunity to pass control to number 2, such as a long hand pass, a kick off the ground, or a player breaking free and running with the ball without being tackled. In these situations, number 2 should back away as the umpire moves towards him with the play. He should also be alert to the fact that the umpire will be looking for an opportunity to relinquish control.
As we saw earlier, the umpire is responsible for awarding all set plays, except for those special circumstances at centre bounces. The umpire is also responsible for deciding who is to have control of a set play, whether he will retain control himself or relinquish it to number 2, with the number 2 becoming the umpire. The following 3 examples will show the procedure where the ball is kicked towards the number 2, away from the number 2, and where a kick at goal is unlikely to score.
In a set play where the kick will be directed towards number 2, the umpire takes up a position about 15 metres inside the player on the mark, where he can observe and control both the kicker and the player on the mark. Number 2 initially takes up a position just short of the anticipated destination of the kick and inside the players waiting for the ball. The umpire supervises the mark and retains control, that is, remains the umpire, until the ball is kicked. Number 2 supervises the players at the receiving end and becomes the umpire when the action commences. The change of control occurs after the kick has been taken. Number 2 has had nothing to do with supervising the mark in this situation. In a set play where the ball will be kicked away from number 2, the umpire supervises play immediately after awarding the mark or free kick by putting the player on the mark. He retains verbal control while backing away in the expected direction of the kick. Meanwhile, number 2 moves quickly towards the mark. When he is between 15 and 20 metres from the mark and in a position to assume verbal control, the umpire relinquishes control. Number 2 becomes the umpire, takes control of the mark, and moves to a position along the line of the mark about 15 metres inside the play. While this is happening, the new number 2 quickly takes up position just short of the expected destination of the kick and about 20 to 25 metres inside the players waiting for the ball. Two umpire control applies in a set play where a kick at goal is unlikely to score. After awarding the set play in this situation, the umpire takes up a position similar to that for a kick away from number 2. That is, he puts the player on the mark and backs away in the direction of the kick until number 2 has moved in to take verbal control. In this case, however, the umpire does not move to the goal line, but stands shorter and wider so that he doesn't get caught up in the ensuing play. Number 2 moves in to supervise the mark and becomes the umpire. he must assume verbal control as soon as possible and move to a position about 15 metres along and inside the line of the mark. As soon as the ball is kicked, he relinquishes control and becomes number 2, taking up his position within the tram lines. The umpire then controls the play which follows from the kick.
Where the umpire awards a set play and the kick is not likely to score, and the umpire is required to show a presence on the spot, he will indicate to the number 2 that he'll be staying at the set play by tapping his buttock. Number 2 will run into the 50-metre area and take up a position appropriate to where he expects the kick to land.
The umpire will take his position where he can control the mark, becoming number 2 as soon as the player disposes of the ball. Alternatively, the umpire may award a set play and then run forward to a position at the expected destination of the kick, so as to keep players forward of the play under observation. In this case, number 2 will run in and position himself to take control of the mark, thus becoming the umpire. When the ball has been kicked, he will adjust his position according to the subsequent play, again becoming number 2. As previously explained, with a few exceptions, one umpire control generally applies within the area bounded by the 50-metre lines. 3 types of set play within the one umpire area are a set play out of defence, a kick at goal likely to score, and a kick in from a behind. Correct positioning is important in each of these set plays. In a set play out of defence, the usual one umpire positioning applies. The umpire will position himself between kicker and catcher at about 45 degrees to the line of the kick. From here, the umpire can observe and have verbal control of the player on the mark, the player with the ball, and the players at the expected destination of the kick. As the ball is kicked, he should run to a position about 20 to 25 metres inside the contesting group and adjacent to it. Number 2 is positioned within the tram lines or just outside, depending on the play, and approximately a kick away on the same side of the major axis as the umpire. If the ball is unlikely to cross the end of square line or its extension to the boundary on each side of the ground, the umpire retains control. This gives number 2 the opportunity to make good position if the ball continues quickly down the ground. If, from a kick out of defence, the ball will cross the end of square line or its extension, the umpire will relinquish control to number 2 immediately after the kick. One umpire control also applies when the player on the mark is required to take up his position less than 40 to 45 metres from the goal and the kick at goal seems likely to score. After lining the player up, the umpire should position himself close enough to have verbal control of both the player on the mark and the player taking the kick. He should stand at least 45 degrees from the anticipated line of the kick. The shorter the kick, the wider this angle should be. Number 2 stands within the tram lines, ready for any rebound. Where the mark of the set play is wide on the ground, near the boundary line for instance, and the umpire has to run out to line up the kick at goal, he must take into account the possibility that the player with the ball may kick or play on quickly. He should ensure that he is not caught out of position by being too close to the mark or under the flight of the ball. The important thing in this situation is that the umpire must be alert and anticipate the next act of play. If it looks like the player will kick quickly or play on, the umpire should not run into the mark, but make position based on the anticipated next act of play. If it is obvious that the player will kick at goal, the umpire should run in quickly and line up the kick, then quickly move back to the correct position.
This can be a major problem area in umpiring. Umpires caught out of position and free kicks missed are often due to lack of concentration and anticipation. One umpire control also applies in a kick-in from a behind.
In this situation, the umpire gives the all clear and clears all players from the area within 5 metres of the goal square. The umpire should then back off about 25 metres from the kick-off line and line himself up with the goal post on the side of the major axis that the player is intending to kick to. Number 2 should stay within the tram lines near to the end of the centre square and adjust his position according to where the kick is directed.
In this segment, we'll explain the responsibilities and positioning of the umpires when dealing with an infringement after disposal. That is, infringements against the kicker or shepherder of the attacking team.
When the kick is directed towards number 2, the umpire blows the whistle loudly and points downfield in the direction of the kick in a clear and obvious manner. He must be sure that number 2 acknowledges and understands that there is a downfield penalty. The umpire then becomes number 2 and must ensure that he takes appropriate action with the player who infringed. This may mean speaking with the player, a caution, or a report. He certainly needs to show a presence and prevent any likelihood of retaliation. Number 2 becomes the umpire and awards the free kick at the spot where the ball landed or was first touched, or allows play to proceed if it has gone to the advantage of the team offended against. When the kick is directed away from number 2, the umpire will blow his whistle, point downfield to where the ball lands, and run with the play. He will award the free kick at the spot where the ball landed or was first touched, or allow play on if it has gone to the advantage of the team offended against. Number 2 should be aware of the situation and immediately take appropriate action with the offending player. If the defending team is infringed against after disposal, the umpire will award the resultant free kick at the spot where the infringement occurred or where the ball is at the time, whichever is to the greater advantage of the team offended against. The position the umpires take up after that will depend on the direction of the kick, as explained earlier.
Throughout this program, it has been emphasised that only the umpire can award free kicks. However, it sometimes happens that a major infringement occurs which is observed by the number 2, but not by the umpire. So it is necessary to make special provisions to enable the number 2 to deal with these exceptional situations.
Circumstances in which number 2 can award a free kick at the centre bounce are if a player interferes with the act of bouncing, 5-in-square infringements, and off-the-ball infringements, for example, holding, shepherding, charging, etc. There are 2 considerations here. The first involves an attacking player infringed against. In this instance, number 2 will blow his whistle loudly to attract the attention of the umpire. The resultant kick will be taken at the spot where the infringement occurred. The second is when a defending player is infringed against. In this instance, number 2 will again blow the whistle loudly to attract the attention of the umpire, and the resultant kick will be taken where the ball was at the time. Under these provisions, a free kick will be awarded only if it will penalise the offending team. A free kick should never be awarded if it will penalise the side offended against. Free kicks will be taken either at the spot where the infringement occurred or where the ball was at the time, whichever more severely penalises the offending team. Number 2 must realise that a free kick awarded under these provisions will interrupt the flow of the game. Therefore, only major infringements should be penalised. When a free kick is awarded by number 2 under these provisions, there is a danger of confusion should the umpire not be aware of number 2's action. So number 2 must be very definite and clear in his action and be sure that the umpire is aware of what's happened and acknowledges. The umpire acknowledges that number 2 has attracted his attention by indicating time on. Where 2 or more field umpires are officiating, The ball shall be deemed dead when one of the field umpires hears the first sound of the siren. He will acknowledge that he has heard the siren by blowing the whistle and raising both arms straight up. As soon as play ends, both umpires are to move to a central spot to enable security measures to be implemented. The boundary umpires retrieve the ball if possible and join the field umpires as soon as practicable.
Well, that brings us to the end of our Level 2 accreditation coaching video. We trust that what you've learnt from the various segments will help you to lift the quality of your umpiring and your standing in the game. Above all, enjoy your time in umpiring and the many advantages that go with it.